They called him a worthless beast and left him forgotten in the shadows, never knowing the chained wolf they abandoned was the Alpha King their entire kingdom was searching for. Clara Bennett had heard those whispers before. In the world she lived in, people often decided someone's value before they ever knew their story. As an Omega, she was used to being overlooked. Many believed Omegas were meant to stay quiet, follow others, and accept the place society gave them. But Clara never believed kindness was a weakness. She believed every living soul deserved compassion, even when no one else cared. On a cold evening near the edge of Blackthorn City, Clara walked through a small market where forgotten creatures were brought by merchants who only cared about profit. She had only a few dollars saved, enough for basic necessities, nothing more. She was not looking for anything unusual. She was simply passing by when she heard a quiet sound from behind a wooden stall. There, hidden away from the crowd, was a large gray wolf sitting alone. Unlike the other animals around him, this wolf did not appear afraid. He watched everything with calm, intelligent eyes that seemed almost human. The merchant noticed Clara looking and quickly dismissed him. "That one is not worth anyone's time," the man said. "Nobody wants him." Clara looked at the wolf and felt something different. She did not see an unwanted creature. She saw someone who had been forgotten. "How long has he been here?" she asked. The merchant shrugged. "Long enough that people stopped asking." Those words stayed in Clara's mind. She knew what it felt like to be ignored. She knew what it was like when others decided she did not matter before giving her a chance. Without thinking about herself, Clara used almost all the money she had to bring the wolf home. The decision surprised everyone around her. Some people questioned why an Omega would spend her limited resources on a wolf nobody wanted. But Clara simply smiled and said, "Everyone deserves a chance to be cared for." She did not know that the wolf beside her was not ordinary. She did not know that his name was Ethan Whitmore, the missing Alpha King of the Werewolf Kingdom. She did not know that powerful leaders had been searching for him, while the world believed he had disappeared forever. All Clara knew was that this quiet wolf seemed to understand every word she spoke. When she offered him water, his eyes softened. When she prepared a small place for him to rest, he watched her with a strange sense of gratitude. For the first time in what felt like forever, Ethan experienced something he had almost forgotten. Someone cared about him without expecting anything in return. Clara had no idea that the mysterious wolf she saved carried a secret that could change her entire life. She believed she had simply rescued a lost soul. But fate had already begun writing a story that would connect an overlooked Omega with the most powerful Alpha in the kingdom. And the world would soon discover that the person who gave the Alpha King his freedom was the one person who saw him when he had nothing left but hope. Clara Bennett never expected the quiet wolf she brought home to become such an important part of her life. She thought she had simply given shelter to a lost creature that needed kindness. She did not know that the wolf resting near her fireplace carried the memories of a powerful leader who had spent years being surrounded by people who wanted his strength, but rarely cared about his heart. From the moment Ethan Whitmore entered Clara's small cottage, something about him felt different. He was calm, observant, and strangely aware of everything around him. He did not behave like an ordinary wolf. He seemed to understand every emotion behind Clara's words. When she spoke to him after a long day, his eyes followed her as if he truly listened. When she smiled, he seemed to recognize the warmth behind it. Clara noticed these things, but she never questioned them too deeply. She simply accepted him as he was. Every morning, she prepared food for him and made sure he had a comfortable place to rest. She used the little resources she had carefully, even though caring for another life made things more difficult. But Clara never complained. She believed that kindness was not something people should offer only when it was convenient. One afternoon, Clara returned home after helping an elderly neighbor nearby. She found Ethan waiting by the door, his expression showing clear concern. For a moment she felt surprised. It almost seemed like he had been worried about her. "You really are an unusual wolf," Clara whispered with a gentle smile. "Sometimes I think you understand me better than most people do." Ethan looked at her quietly, feeling emotions he had not experienced in a long time. Before losing his connection to the kingdom, he had been surrounded by advisors, guards, and people who followed his commands. Yet none of them had given him the simple acceptance Clara showed every day. She did not know his title. She did not know his history. She only knew that he needed help, and she chose to provide it. Meanwhile, far beyond Clara's small cottage, the werewolf kingdom continued searching for its missing ruler. The disappearance of the Alpha King had created uncertainty throughout the land. Many wondered where Ethan Whitmore had gone and whether he would ever return. The royal council searched for answers, but no one knew that their lost king was living quietly with an Omega who had never cared about his power. As days passed, Ethan began noticing something about Clara that fascinated him. She treated everyone with the same respect, whether they were wealthy or struggling. She never looked down on anyone. She never asked what someone could give her before offering kindness. It was a quality he had rarely seen, even among those closest to the throne. One evening, as Clara sat outside beneath the stars, Ethan rested beside her in silence. She looked toward the sky and spoke softly. "I hope everyone finds someone who sees them for who they really are." Ethan felt those words deeply. For years, people had seen him as an alpha, a ruler and a symbol of power. Almost no one had seen him simply as Ethan. But this Omega had done exactly that without even knowing his name. Clara believed she had rescued a forgotten wolf. She did not realize that the greatest leader in the werewolf kingdom had found something far more valuable than freedom. He had found someone who made him feel understood. Days passed quietly in Clara Bennett's cottage, and the bond between the Omega and the mysterious wolf grew stronger with every sunrise. Clara still believed she had only given a forgotten animal a second chance, but Ethan Whitmore was beginning to understand that she had given him something much greater. She had given him a place where he did not have to pretend. In the royal world he came from, Ethan had always carried expectations on his shoulders. As the Alpha King, every decision mattered. Every word was judged. Every action represented the future of the werewolf kingdom. But with Clara there were no expectations. She did not ask him to be powerful. She did not expect him to lead. She simply cared for him because she believed he deserved kindness. One morning, Clara noticed something unusual. While cleaning the small garden behind her cottage, she found that Ethan had carefully moved some fallen branches away from the path. It was a simple gesture, but it showed thoughtfulness. She smiled as she looked at him. "You really are different from other wolves," she said softly. "Sometimes I wonder what kind of life you had before you came here." Ethan lowered his eyes, remembering the palace halls, the responsibilities, and the people who depended on him. He wanted to tell her everything. He wanted to explain that he was not just a lost wolf. He was the ruler of the kingdom beyond the forest. But something stopped him. For the first time in his life, someone cared about him without knowing his title. He did not want to lose that. Meanwhile, rumors continued spreading throughout Blackthorn Kingdom. The search for the missing Alpha King became more urgent, and many people wondered whether their leader would ever return. The royal advisors searched every possible place, but they never imagined that their king was living peacefully in a small cottage with an Omega who had no connection to the royal world. Clara remained unaware of the mystery surrounding Ethan. She continued treating him with the same patience and warmth she gave everyone else. She spoke to him during quiet evenings, sharing stories about her dreams and the life she hoped to build. Someday, Ethan listened carefully, realizing that Clara's dreams were not about wealth or recognition. She wanted a world where people were valued for their hearts rather than their status. Those words stayed with him. They reminded him of the kind of leader he wanted to become. One afternoon, Clara noticed Ethan watching the distant mountains with a thoughtful expression. She sat beside him and gently asked, "Do you miss where you came from?" Ethan remained silent for a moment before answering, "I miss what I hoped it could become." Clara looked at him with understanding. "Maybe one day you can help make it better." Ethan looked at her, surprised by how easily she believed in possibilities. She did not know his struggles. She did not know his responsibilities. Yet she still believed that change was possible. That evening, Ethan realized something important. Clara was not simply helping him recover from being lost. She was reminding him why leadership mattered in the first place. She saw the person beneath the power. She saw kindness beneath the strength. She saw hope beneath the silence. And somewhere deep inside, Ethan began to understand that fate had not brought him to Clara's doorstep by accident. The Omega who saved a forgotten wolf was slowly becoming the one person who could change the future of the entire werewolf kingdom. The quiet life Clara Bennett shared with the mysterious wolf continued to change in ways she never expected. What began as a simple act of kindness had slowly become something deeper, something neither of them could easily explain. Clara still saw Ethan as a lost soul who needed care, but Ethan saw Clara as the person who had reminded him of the values he once promised to protect as the Alpha King. Each day with her revealed something he had forgotten about himself. He remembered that leadership was not only about making decisions, it was about understanding the people behind those decisions. One afternoon, while Clara gathered herbs near the edge of the forest, Ethan noticed how carefully she treated every living thing around her. She moved slowly, making sure not to disturb the natural beauty around her. It was a small moment, but it showed him exactly who she was. Clara did not seek attention for her kindness. She did not help others because she wanted praise. She helped because compassion was simply part of her nature. When she returned to the cottage, she found Ethan waiting near the doorway. His expression was calm, but his eyes carried a feeling she had seen many times before. It was almost as if he wanted to say something important. "You look like you are thinking about something," Clara said with a gentle smile. Ethan looked away for a moment. He wanted to tell her the truth. He wanted to explain that he was not an ordinary wolf, and that the world beyond the forest was searching for him. But he also feared that everything would change once she knew. Clara had treated him with kindness when she believed he had nothing to offer. Would she still look at him the same way if she discovered he was the most powerful alpha in the kingdom? That question remained in his mind. Meanwhile, in the royal city, the search for Ethan Whitmore continued. The royal council studied every possible clue, trying to understand how their Alpha King could disappear without a trace. The people of the kingdom missed their leader, but they also worried about the uncertainty left behind. They did not know that the missing king was experiencing a lesson no royal advisor could have taught him. He was learning what it felt like to be valued without a crown. Back at the cottage, Clara began noticing small signs that Ethan was not what he seemed. He reacted to situations with unusual awareness. He seemed to understand emotions more deeply than any animal she had ever known. Sometimes, when she spoke about the struggles of being an Omega, his expression changed as if her words personally affected him. "I think people often decide who someone is before they ever give them a chance," Clara said one evening while watching the sunset. "They see a label first and a person second." Ethan listened carefully. Her words felt familiar because he had witnessed the same thing throughout his life. People saw him as Alpha before they saw him as Ethan. Clara understood that pain without ever knowing his story. In that moment, Ethan realized something powerful. The Omega beside him was not only kind, she was wise. She understood the world in a way many leaders never learned. As the moon rose above the forest, Ethan looked toward the distant lights of the kingdom he once ruled. He knew he could not hide forever. One day, the truth would have to be revealed. But before that moment arrived, he wanted to protect the connection they had built. Because Clara was the first person who saw him when he had no title, no power, and no crown. She saw only a soul that needed compassion. And Ethan knew that was something he would never forget. The days spent in Clara Bennett's cottage had become something Ethan Whitmore never expected to experience. For the first time in many years, he was not surrounded by expectations, commands, or endless responsibilities. He was simply someone sitting beside a warm fire, listening to another person share stories about ordinary life. And strangely, those simple moments felt more valuable than all the celebrations he had received as the Alpha King. Clara continued caring for Ethan without knowing his true identity. She never treated him like a powerful figure. She never tried to gain anything from him. Every action came from genuine kindness, and that was exactly what made it impossible for Ethan to forget her. One morning, Clara noticed Ethan watching the road outside their cottage for a long time. His expression carried a quiet sadness. She sat beside him and gently asked, "Are you waiting for someone?" Ethan looked toward the forest before answering, "Maybe I am waiting for a place I can return to." Clara understood that feeling. She knew what it was like to feel as if the world had already decided where you belonged. As an Omega, she had spent years hearing what she could not do and where she could not stand. But she refused to let those opinions define her. "Sometimes," Clara said softly, "home is not the place where people expect you to be. Sometimes it is the place where someone accepts you completely." Ethan looked at her, feeling the weight of those words. She had no idea how close she was to the truth, because the place where he felt most accepted was not his royal palace. It was this small cottage with the Omega who had saved him. Meanwhile, the royal search for the missing Alpha King reached another turning point. Ancient records were reviewed, and the royal advisors discovered clues suggesting that Ethan's disappearance was connected to an old legend. The legend spoke of a hidden journey where an Alpha would find clarity away from power and return with a renewed understanding of leadership. The advisors did not know where their king was, but they began to believe that his absence had a greater meaning. Back at the cottage, Ethan noticed Clara struggling with her own challenges. She had given so much of herself to others that she often forgot to care for herself. When a neighbor needed help, Clara was always the first to offer support. When someone felt forgotten, she was the person who noticed. Ethan admired that about her. He had ruled a kingdom, but Clara reminded him that true influence came from touching individual lives. One evening, while sitting beneath the stars, Ethan finally asked the question he had been holding inside. "Why did you save me?" Clara looked surprised. "Because you needed help. But you did not know anything about me." She smiled gently. "I did not need to. Someone does not have to prove they are important before they deserve kindness." Ethan became silent. Those words reached deeper than she realized. His entire life, people had respected him because of his title. They followed him because he was the Alpha King. But Clara had chosen him when she believed he was nothing more than a forgotten wolf. That was the moment Ethan understood the truth. The bond between them was not created because of power or destiny. It was created because Clara had seen him at his weakest and still believed he mattered. As the night grew quiet, Ethan knew the time to reveal his identity was approaching. The kingdom needed its king back. But before he returned, he needed Clara to understand one thing. The person she rescued was not valuable because he was an Alpha King. He was valuable because she had reminded him that every soul deserved to be seen. The morning after Ethan Whitmore realized he could no longer hide the truth, the small cottage felt different. The quiet moments he had shared with Clara Bennett suddenly felt even more precious because he knew they were coming to an end. Soon he would have to return to the kingdom, reclaim his place, and reveal the secret he had kept since the day she rescued him. But a part of him feared losing the one person who had known him without a crown. Clara noticed the change in Ethan's behavior. The wolf who usually stayed close to her seemed more thoughtful than ever. She could sense that he carried a burden, but she never forced him to explain. She had learned that trust meant giving someone the space to share their truth when they were ready. One afternoon, while preparing a simple meal, Clara found an old piece of fabric caught near Ethan's resting place. It carried a symbol she did not recognize, but there was something about it that felt important. Ethan immediately noticed it and became quiet. He knew the symbol belonged to the royal family of Blackthorn Kingdom. It was another reminder that the time for honesty was near. Clara looked at him with curiosity. "Do you know what this means?" Ethan hesitated before answering. "It is connected to someone I used to be." Clara studied his expression carefully. She did not see fear. She saw someone preparing to face a difficult truth. "You know you can tell me anything," she said softly. "I will not judge you based on where you came from." Her words stayed with him. She still did not know the truth, yet she was already offering the same acceptance that had changed his life. Meanwhile, the royal advisors finally discovered information that brought them closer to their missing king. A group of travelers had reported seeing a rare wolf near the forest border, living alongside a young Omega woman. The description was unusual enough that the royal council immediately began investigating. They could not believe the possibility that their Alpha King had been close all along. Back at the cottage, Ethan spent the evening watching Clara prepare flowers near the window. He remembered the first day they met. He remembered how she had looked at him without fear or hesitation. She had not seen a powerful ruler. She had seen someone who needed help. "Clara," Ethan said quietly. She turned toward him. "Yes." He paused, choosing every word carefully. "What would you do if someone you cared about was not who you thought they were?" Clara smiled gently. "I would ask why they were afraid to tell me." Ethan felt a quiet warmth in his heart. Her answer was exactly what he expected and yet exactly what he needed to hear. She did not believe mistakes or secrets defined a person. She believed understanding came from listening. As the sun began to set, Ethan knew he could not delay the truth any longer. He had spent enough time as a forgotten wolf. He had learned lessons no palace could teach him. He had discovered that the greatest strength of a leader was not authority, but the ability to understand others. And Clara had taught him that lesson without even knowing who he was. That evening, beneath the peaceful sky, Ethan made his decision. Soon Clara would learn everything. She would learn that the wolf she saved was not just a lost creature. He was the Alpha King. But before that moment came, Ethan held on to one final hope. He hoped that after discovering the truth, Clara would still see the same person she had chosen to save. The moment Ethan Whitmore decided to reveal the truth, he realized that the hardest part was not returning to the throne. It was facing Clara Bennett and risking the one connection that had changed his entire life. For the first time, the Alpha King understood that losing someone's trust could hurt more than carrying the weight of a kingdom. Clara had given him kindness when she believed he had nothing to offer. Now he wondered if that kindness would remain after she learned who he truly was. The next morning, a quiet change came to the small cottage. Ethan stood near the window, looking toward the distant forest where the royal lands waited beyond the trees. Clara noticed his thoughtful expression and gently placed a cup of tea beside him. "You seem ready to leave," she said softly. Ethan looked at her, surprised by how easily she understood him. "How did you know?" Clara smiled. "Because sometimes people look toward the place they came from when they know they have unfinished things to do." Her words made him realize once again why she was different. Clara never demanded explanations. She simply noticed what others ignored. Ethan took a deep breath. He knew there was no perfect way to tell her the truth. There was only honesty. "Clara, there is something I need to tell you." She sat quietly, giving him her full attention. Ethan explained that the wolf she rescued was not an ordinary creature. He told her about the kingdom, the missing Alpha King, and the life he had before coming to her cottage. With every word, Clara listened carefully. She did not interrupt. She did not step away. She simply tried to understand. When Ethan finally revealed his true identity, silence filled the room. Clara looked at him, trying to process everything she had heard. The wolf she had cared for was not lost. He was not forgotten. He was Ethan Whitmore, the Alpha King of Blackthorn Kingdom. "You were the one everyone was searching for," Clara whispered. Ethan lowered his gaze. "Yes, but with you I was not a king. I was just someone who needed help." Clara thought about all the moments they had shared. The quiet evenings. The conversations beneath the stars. The way he always seemed to understand her feelings. Suddenly everything made sense. She remembered how different he had always been. She remembered the intelligence in his eyes and the calm strength he carried. But one question remained in her heart. "Why did you stay silent?" she asked. Ethan answered honestly. "Because you were the first person who cared about me without knowing my title. I was afraid that if you knew the truth, you would see the crown before you saw me." Clara looked at him with understanding. She realized that the Alpha King everyone admired was also someone who wanted to be accepted for who he truly was. "I saved you because you needed someone," Clara said. "Not because you were a king. Not because you could give me anything." Ethan felt the weight in his heart become lighter. Her words confirmed what he had hoped for. Before he returned to the kingdom, Ethan made one promise. He promised that he would never forget the lesson Clara taught him. A true leader was not defined by power, but by compassion. And Clara, the Omega who had rescued a forgotten wolf, finally understood that the soul she had protected belonged to the very person who would one day change her destiny forever. The journey back to Blackthorn Kingdom felt different for Ethan Whitmore. Before meeting Clara Bennett, returning to the palace would have meant returning to expectations, responsibilities, and the endless pressure of being the Alpha King. But now everything had changed. He was no longer returning as someone who only carried a title. He was returning as someone who had discovered the importance of compassion, trust, and being understood. Clara traveled with him toward the kingdom, still trying to process everything she had learned. The quiet wolf she had rescued was not just a forgotten creature. He was the leader of the Werewolf Kingdom, a person whose decisions affected thousands of lives. Yet despite the truth, Clara did not see him differently. She still saw the same person who had sat beside her fireplace, listened to her stories, and reminded her that she was not invisible. When they arrived at the royal city, the people were filled with emotion. The return of their Alpha King brought hope back to the kingdom. Many had wondered if Ethan would ever come home, and seeing him again reminded them that their leader had not abandoned them. But what surprised everyone was the person standing beside him. Clara noticed the curious looks from the crowd. She was not used to being surrounded by royalty, and she wondered if people would accept someone like her. As an Omega without a powerful family name, she had spent years believing she belonged somewhere in the background. Ethan noticed her uncertainty and quietly reminded her, "Do not forget the person you were before anyone knew your name." Clara looked at him, remembering the words she had once told him. She realized that even the Alpha King needed reminders sometimes. During his first meeting with the royal advisors, Ethan spoke about the lessons he learned while away from the palace. He explained that leadership was not only about making decisions from a throne, it was about listening to the voices of people who were often ignored. Many advisors were surprised by the changes in his perspective. The Alpha King who had returned was still strong, but he carried a new understanding of what true leadership meant. Later, Ethan brought Clara to the royal gardens, a place where generations of Alpha leaders had walked while making important choices. "This place once reminded me of everything I had to carry," he said. "Now it reminds me of everything I almost forgot." Clara looked at him with curiosity. "What did you forget?" Ethan smiled. "That even a king needs someone who sees him as a person." Clara felt the meaning behind his words. She never wanted power or recognition. She never wanted to stand beside him because of his title. She only wanted him to remember that kindness mattered. As days passed, the kingdom slowly began to understand why Ethan valued Clara so deeply. They saw that she did not seek attention or influence. She simply brought out the best in their Alpha King. The people who once believed strength came only from authority began to see a different kind of strength. They saw patience. They saw empathy. They saw a connection built on trust. Ethan knew the road ahead would not always be simple. There would always be challenges, opinions, and expectations. But now he no longer faced them alone. The Omega who saved him when he had no crown was the same person who reminded him what a crown was truly meant to represent. And Clara finally understood that the lost wolf she rescued had never needed someone to make him powerful. He needed someone to remind him of the heart behind the power he already possessed. Months passed after Ethan Whitmore returned to Blackthorn Kingdom, and the changes he brought with him became impossible to ignore. The Alpha King was still the respected leader his people had always known, but there was something different about him now. He no longer ruled from a distance. He listened more carefully, valued every voice, and remembered the lesson an Omega had taught him in a small cottage far from the palace. Clara Bennett remained by his side, not because of a title or a promise of power, but because their connection had been built on something much stronger: trust, understanding, and the simple kindness that brought two unexpected lives together. At first, many people in the kingdom wondered about Clara. They questioned how an Omega with no royal background could stand beside the Alpha King. They had spent years believing that status determined a person's worth. But Clara never tried to prove herself through position or influence. She continued being the same person who had opened her door to a forgotten wolf when everyone else looked away. Slowly, the kingdom began to understand what Ethan had seen from the beginning. Clara's strength was not found in authority. It was found in her compassion. She noticed those who felt unseen. She listened to those who were often ignored. She reminded people that every person deserved respect. One evening, Ethan and Clara walked through the royal gardens where they had shared so many important conversations. The same place where Ethan once carried the weight of being a king now represented something completely different. "Do you ever miss the quiet days in the cottage?" Clara asked with a gentle smile. Ethan looked toward the peaceful gardens and smiled. "I miss the moments when you saw me before you knew my name." Clara looked at him thoughtfully. "I still see you the same way." Those words meant more to him than any royal ceremony or celebration, because Clara had given him something no kingdom could offer. She had given him the freedom to be himself. Ethan had spent his life believing that a strong alpha needed to carry every burden alone. But Clara showed him that true strength also came from allowing others to understand you. Together, they became a symbol throughout the werewolf kingdom. Not because they represented power, but because they represented change. Their story reminded people that kindness could reach places where authority could not. It reminded them that a person's value was never decided by a label. And it reminded everyone that sometimes the smallest act of compassion could create the greatest transformation. Years later, the story of the lost wolf and the Omega who saved him continued to be shared throughout the kingdom. Many remembered the Alpha King's return, but they also remembered the moment before the crown, before the recognition, and before the world knew the truth. They remembered the Omega who saw a forgotten soul and chose to help. Ethan knew that he would always be grateful for that moment. Because before Clara knew he was the Alpha King, she had already shown him something far more valuable than power. She showed him what it meant to be truly seen. And Clara finally understood that the wolf she rescued was never just a creature waiting for freedom. He was a king waiting for someone to remind him that even the strongest hearts needed kindness. Their story became a timeless reminder across the werewolf kingdom. The greatest power was not found in a crown, but in the heart of someone brave enough to care.